All right, so tonight's first story, RFK has been slammed, is anti-Semitic for a claim he made that there's a conversation that needs to be had surrounding some allegations that COVID is more likely to infect or is more likely to result in mortality among certain ethnic groups. So we can watch this video right now, and then we'll talk about what some of the people in the press are saying about him. Ooh, actually, do you think YouTube might get mad at us if we play this whole thing?
Why? They're censoring
No,
his
I
free
don't think
speech
so.
Yeah. All right, we'll play it. You hearing that?
No, I'm not getting any audio.
All right. Well, it's not coming through the audio. While we get that working, we're just going to...
Well, we could talk about it.
Yeah, we're just going to explain this. So basically, RFK said, as I mentioned, and he wasn't even saying that he necessarily believed that this was the case, but he's saying that there needs to be a conversation surrounding the fact that, according to him, certain studies are showing that COVID does seem to disproportionately affect certain people. And he was claiming that the effect that it's having on people is based on genetic factors that are linked to ethnic or racial background. Now, I find it very interesting that the left is losing their minds about this because they were actually saying very similar things about COVID during the pandemic.
Yes, this was early on. The CDC was saying that COVID had a greater impact on Black and brown communities, right? They were saying this specifically. They were saying, too, that if you were not taking COVID precautions, you were not only killing grandmas, but you were racist.
Yeah.
Because you weren't paying enough attention.
And I think it's interesting because they also made this a justification for allowing people of color to take the vaccine first. So this was a
right. There were
tenet.
a whole lot of affirmative action style policies surrounding COVID, the implementation of treatment, all of these things. And now you're not allowed to say that?
Well, exactly. I mean, they were constantly claiming that the African-American community, in particular the Black community, was being disproportionately affected by COVID. And because of this, we needed to be sure that they got the vaccines first. And so RFK, he's saying something a bit different because he is outwardly making the claim that this is based on genetic predisposition and not necessarily cultural factors. But I don't even know if he's making that claim or if he's just saying that is a claim we have to investigate.
Exactly. But what happens when we listen to this, and if you listen to him talking, he starts it off with saying there's an argument that, and then he starts talking that this does this, and this does this. And if you take it out of context, it sounds like he's saying this does this and this does this. But he preempts it with there's an argument that there are like genetic bioweapons, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's even a Newsweek.
Studies.
Yes.
Yeah.
There, in fact, this Newsweek, so maybe we can pull up the Pentagon making race-specific bioweapons to target citizens. China says, according to Newsweek, China's making the claim that the Pentagon's doing race-specific bioweapons. And this is as recent as May 11th of 2023.
Yeah.
Well, and when I saw RFK put up this long thread on Twitter saying the New York Post is taking me out of context. They are misrepresenting what I've said. Here is a specific link to a study. Here is what I meant by this. And he ultimately demanded that they issue an apology because he feels like...
Do you know if they did? Did they?
The story is still up and I haven't seen any apology listed.
Correction at all?
No correction as far as I could see, or at least acknowledged correction. And again, some of this is maybe they are making an editorial decision. I'm sure you can speak to this. Well, our reporter took this quote and...
well, what's interesting, too, is if you look at the headline and you look at the story, they don't really match.
No.
They don't.
So it seems like, I know John Levine wrote the story. I wonder if John Levine wrote the headline or if someone else wrote that headline. I know you guys are in a newsroom, right? Like we have people doing graphics, we have people doing headlines, we have people writing stories, and the graphic, the headline, and the story could all come from completely different people on the, the same team.
And it's all sort of blurbs. You're saying like, oh, this is what it's about.
Right.
I think it's interesting to me. My first instinct when I see these kinds of conflicts is to say like, wow, RFK really has them on the ropes. They do not like this guy's perspective.
I mean, this is them really starting to launch into the Trump treatment of RFK. So for a while they were saying he's a quack, he's spreading misinformation, he's a huckster, he's trying to sell snake oil and fool people about the medical science for his own personal gain. The typical kind of stuff you hear about anyone who gets labeled a conspiracy theorist by the establishment. But now they're actually moving into this guy's racist territory, right? They're openly referring to him as an anti-Semite simply because he said he wanted to have a discussion about the degree to which COVID seems to have affected different populations. Now, of course, the left was very comfortable having the conversation about the effects COVID had on different populations, again, in 2020, in 2021, when they claimed it was disproportionately affecting the African-American community, the Black community.
If there's anyone who can recognize anti-Semitism, it should be the people on the Democrat side, because they are really anti-Semitic in a lot of cases. Pramila Jayapal came out the other day and was saying that Israel is a racist state. You have Ilhan Omar, who is decidedly anti-Semitic. It seems to be in a lot of cases what the Democrats accuse other people of doing is the thing that they are doing themselves.
All the time. All the time. And there's another element to this, which is really important that I want to flag. They're using this term bioweapon, right? They're saying he's a conspiracy theorist. He's saying COVID is a bioweapon. And this is a term that people will generally associate with conspiracy theory. And because it's so bombastic, it sounds frightening. But according to Sir Francis Boyle, the American author of the American implementing legislation of the International Bioweapons Convention, anything created through gain-of-function research is a bioweapon. This is the legal definition. So if it's created through gain-of-function research, which many of these institutions are now acknowledging, given that they're saying lab leak hypothesis is more than likely, then it is a bioweapon. That's not a controversial claim. That's literally what the law says. That's literally what the man who wrote the law has said about it. And what the left has done is, guess what? Labeled him a conspiracy theorist, even though he's literally the person who was responsible for implementing that legislation and writing around it. And they're saying he's a lawyer, not an epidemiologist. How can he be saying it's a biological weapon? Well, because whether something's a biological weapon is not a question of epidemiology, it's a question of law, and he literally wrote the thing.
This is something that's bothering me right now. So I'm looking at the New York Times article titled "Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Airs Bigoted New COVID Conspiracy Theory About Jews and Chinese." Is that the article in question? I haven't read the article yet.
No, it's a New York Post article.
A New York Post. Okay. All these, it looks like these other outlets are picking up the claim. It's like
Everybody
a game of
picked it up.
telephone.
And to be fair,
And you could see it all over Twitter too. Everyone starts coming out saying that RFK is racist and anti-Semitic and hateful and all of these kinds of things. It really was this classic snowball effect where you have, one headline drove everything. A lot of the people who are talking about this story, I wonder if they even read the article or watched the interview or just ran with the headline.
I'm looking at The Guardian now. White House condemned. The White House is now chiming in on it. So it's not just news organizations.
His sister condemned this statement. But this is the thing that's interesting about RFK's role in his own family. From the get-go, he was the media's favorite new conspiracy theorist, right? The day that he announced, that was one of the first things that came out. He questions vaccines. He's a conspiracy theorist. And, regardless of the fact that you don't necessarily have to take medical advice from a politician, I understand that. It is interesting that this was the brand they were going to use to hurt his campaign from the beginning, and now they're just sort of going back and trying to find more evidence of this. And that's why I think it's an important conversation to have. Was this quote accurately represented in the article? Is he referring to a study? Is he himself promoting false information? Because if you don't know that, it's easy to then to assume he is in fact this deranged person, right?
Also, how quickly we forget everything. We forget the beginning of COVID. We forget all of these conspiracy theories that, as they were called, about the lab leak and everything else that have proven out.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
No, that have proven to be true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, but there's another element to this too. There's a couple things I want to mention here. Firstly, this strikes me as RFK having his Jewish space lasers moment. So for those who don't know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is constantly slandered as having said there are these Jewish space lasers. It's total nonsense.
It's not what she
Before
said.
she was ever elected to office, she made a very long Facebook post where she was saying things which, by the way, I'm not defending, I don't agree with, but she was basically saying that she thought that forest fires were started by, or potentially started, she basically floated the question they may have been started by a satellite, which was funded by organizations that people claim it is anti-Semitic to criticize. She never, it's basically the equivalent of saying, oh, if you say something negative about George Soros, you're an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. Marjorie Taylor Greene never, ever, ever said the Jewish space lasers thing. It's complete nonsense. Even left-wing fact checkers have said that that's not exactly true. They've given it a mixed factuality rating, which is ridiculous because it is totally false. But when you read their rationale, they say, well, no, she never said there were Jewish space lasers. She just said that this space satellite that was funded by groups that anti-Semites don't like might have started the fire. So I guess my point is this is another example of the media and the left-wing establishment seeing somebody as a threat and wanting to take everything they're saying totally out of context. And I got to be honest, I've mentioned that I think RFK has problems. There's a lot I don't agree with him on. Obviously, I'm a conservative, so I'm not going to agree with him on quite a lot. But I felt similarly about Trump. I'm not saying I'll ever support RFK. I could never support a pro-choice candidate, but I remember when Trump first came out of the scene, I remember thinking, I'm not a huge fan of this guy. And then I saw who his enemies were and what they were saying about him and how they were smearing him, and I began to warm up to him. So the media is playing a very dangerous game if their goal is to get people to hate RFK, because the American people know at this point that if you're an enemy of the press, you're a friend of the people.
Yeah, I think that's so true.
Well, and if you're an enemy of the Democrats, you're probably a friend of the people too.
I've got
I would say,
a feeling
exactly.
that like these organizations, somebody maybe somewhere actually saw it out of context and was like, he said these things, and then they printed it, and then whether or not they believed they were going to get him out of context and make stuff, maybe they're making stuff up maliciously, maybe they actually thought it, but I think that then the White House and the people in the O'Biden camp,
I think we should call it the O'Biden camp. That makes
are
a lot
like,
of sense.
let's go with it. He's our biggest threat. He's obviously gonna win the presidency if he's not slandered and stopped, and he's the biggest threat to the medical pharmaceutical.
Do you think he has a chance of winning the presidency?
Well, Michelle Obama apparently is going to run, so no.
What about Gavin Newsom? He seems to be making
He'll probably
a
be
little
Michelle's
noise.
VP, probably.
You
I
think so?
I think if Michelle runs, Newsom won't stand a
Does
chance.
Michelle
think
Obama have any more qualifications than Hillary Clinton did? I think she has less.
I think she
wasn't
actually has less,
She
to be
wasn't even
honest.
Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.